When I took over here, there was COVID. All of a sudden, no one knew how to run the business school because we had to shut down, we had to work from home. Being a woman leader has its own challenges. We are not accustomed to seeing a woman lead an institution. We are not even accustomed to seeing an African person lead. There's a lot of suffering in leadership. As a leader, you are standing in front of people that whatever decision you make, there will be people that will be affected or disaffected by your decision.
Welcome to this Business Lens podcast, a thought leadership podcast brought to you by the UNISA Graduate School of Business Leadership. I'm your host, Prof Nhlanhla Mlitwa, a researcher, academic advisor, a proud member of the SBL community. For our very first episode, we are honored to begin with a leader who has been at the forefront of the SBL, transformation and global rise. She has just returned from the Global South Media and Think Tank Forum. She has been central to some of the SBL's biggest milestones in recent history, including our international BGI accreditation and the celebration of the school's 60th anniversary. Prof, welcome to the show. Thank you for opening this new chapter with us.
You are most welcome. What a pleasure.
You have just came back from the Global South Media and Think Tank Forum, a major platform shaping intellectual and policy direction for developing nations. I just want to have a conversation with you about that. Prof, you recently participated in this initiative. How was the experience for you?
Prof, that was an amazing, powerful experience. There were over 41 African countries represented, over 200 entities, media entities, and companies that are involved in owning the African narrative. They were part of that conference. And it was mediated and facilitated by even funded by the Chinese government. It was an eye-opener, I must say. To have captains of industry in the media space consolidating their voices, saying, let us own our narratives as Global South, and let us deepen our understanding, our cooperation, and let us work with partners such as China, where we have had a relationship for over 500, maybe even thousands of years. If you look at the fact that Mapungubwe has got archaeological evidence of the Chinese presence in Africa in 3 AD.
Thank you for that. It sounds significant. What stood out for you about Africa's voice in the global conversation?
Well, the eagerness, the vibration, the positive vibration, people echoing the idea that let us stand together as Global South. Let us make sure that we shape our narrative. Let us make sure that we are included in decisions. We are part of the global community, and we are included in our own agendas, and we are not dictated to by external forces. So to actually come and say, let us challenge the current unilateral system, calling all media houses, calling institutions, calling think tanks, all think tanks in Africa, saying, let us own our narrative of solidarity, of unity, of global peace.
Especially unity and global peace, you say?
Especially unity and global peace.
So do you think these kinds of collaborations are so important at this point in our time?
Absolutely. If you look at the fact that the unilateral system has completely broken down, there is now an introduction of a multilateral system where sovereignty of countries, sovereignty of intellectual thought is now a biggest agenda item. And also just the issue of ensuring that we secure the dignity of the people of the Global South. And with the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement saying we want to trade amongst ourselves as Africans, and this conversation mediated by China that is invested in Africa through their Belt and Road Initiative, through the Infrastructure Initiative. We need this collaboration, we need these conversations, we need to find ways of building multi-directional flows of knowledge, so that knowledge does not come from the north or from the west, but knowledge flows from the south to the west, from the south to the east, and from the east to the south.
Thank you for that. It's very profound. It makes me wonder, do you have a perspective about what you see as the role of academic institutions in this conversation? Academic institutions.
Oh, absolutely. Remember, if we're talking first unifying ourselves as Africans through the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, firstly, we need to build the AfCFTA architecture, business architecture. That means we need to completely change the curriculum. We need to challenge the current governance frameworks that focus on institutions instead of focusing on people in the institutions. Because when institutions are the only focus, it means that the people that build those institutions are not really important. So I think the current conversation requires academia to seek legitimacy from societal impact.
I noticed, Prof, that you just hinted on Africa Continental Free Trade Area when you were responding and just articulating the role of universities. And I think I would like to be able to just engage on the intra-Africa trade and Africa Continental Free Trade Area, because I think it links very well with your last sentiment about the role of universities, how we should change the curriculum, just how we reposition ourselves going forward, supported by the academic institutions. Just want to touch base with you on a few pointers here. You've recently launched a book on the African Continental Free Trade Area. Why is this African trade such a deeply personal passion for you?
It is very an important topic. It's also a topic that my work is focused on as a global business professor. And also it's a topic that really connects us as a business school to communities in Africa. We can't solve African problems without understanding the geopolitical complexity of our problems and how we are connected with the rest of the world. So if you look at the fact that this integration has been fought for, people have died for it, for hundreds of years since Africa was divided up. And in 1963, the Organization of African Unity came up with an idea that let us integrate Africa so that we shape our own agendas for economic development. And this directive from the African leaders only came to fruition, to pass in 2019, when the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement was accented to by the African leaders. So can you see how long it has taken from 1963, crafting integration of Africa, and for the first time, African leaders agreed that let us collapse our borders. And now we are one Africa. Here is the challenge. We are one Africa. Are we ready to trade as nations across borders? So as an academic institution, it's an imperative, it's a mandate for us to prepare our students. If you look at consumer behavior textbooks now are completely irrelevant if they are not talking about consumer behavior of the multi-dimensional, multicultural context of Africa and the context of other partners that support Africa's growth. So we really, the world order for us specifically speaks to our integration as Africa. And how is the West, how is Europe, how is America, how is China, how is Brazil, how is the East going to assist us if we don't have a coherent process of working amongst ourselves as African people? Remember, Prof, and I say this as a reminder of how much vast the scope is to work in the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement space. We trade amongst ourselves as African for less than 20%, which means 80% and more of the trade in Africa is done with external partners, countries. So it has to be a mandate, an imperative mandate for business schools to recurriculate, to transform the curriculum so that it speaks to this new frontier of knowledge, which is the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. And that's not enough, because for us to grow in Africa, we have to have markets outside Africa. And when we are working with China, when we are working with the rest of the world, with the East, the West, the South, we need to work from this Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement script.
Thank you for that. I'm listening to you, Prof, and I can already sense the passion that you have on this topic. And I also think that if I want to refer to your book, I can already be motivated that there's quite a lot that I can actually gain because of the insight that you are giving. It keeps coming, it keeps coming. It definitely is your passion. You just spoke now about the collapsing of borders. And I think from what I'm hearing, that is key. And you are also saying that 80% of trade is not among Africans. In your view, what do you conceive as, what you perceive as perhaps could be the barriers that is preventing Africa from trading more among itself than it does with the externals?
Thank you for that question, because Prof, the reason is firstly, it's the tariffs. Remember, we were charging one another tariffs. If I buy goods from Kenya, I would pay tariff tax. And if I want to export my goods to Ghana, they would charge us tariff tax, which is tax. But that tax is paid by the consumer, which makes trading expensive amongst African countries. So the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement is requesting, or rather it's a prescription for countries to put up a set of their tariff items, that is their products, at zero tariff, so that trading is cost effective. But the biggest problem, because the tariffs have been, countries have deposited their trading instruments where they have identified the items that are trading at zero tariff. The problem, Prof, the biggest problem is the non-tariff barriers. Remember, when the country was divided up into a European region, South Africa, for instance, was colonized by the British. There's a French zone, there's a Francophone, there's a Portuguese colonial, such as Mozambique. What happened there is that the infrastructure that was developed was really focused on the commodities that were taken from Africa to the rest of the world. So the infrastructure we have, look at the road infrastructure. The road infrastructure is very beautiful for roads that connect the ports to the airport. But if you look at the road infrastructure where the majority of Africans reside, they are not the same. So those infrastructure I'm just talking about road infrastructure, but there's another bigger infrastructure issue. IT infrastructure. Look at an ordinary rural area. Look at the IT infrastructure, the facilitation of the movement of data, even the cost of data that moves to assist people in the rural areas. That is a barrier. So IT is a barrier, data is a barrier, services to service our own people. All of these are the non-tariff barriers, but non-tariff barriers have got different categories. For trading, we talk about what we call sanitary barriers. These are barriers related to the health and safety of products, especially fresh produce kind of products. So for our traders to qualify to trade, they have to comply with these phytosanitary compliance issues. And these phytosanitary compliance issues are steep financially. So can you imagine a farmer who wants to sell mangoes to the east or to the west? They have to meet specific phytosanitary requirements, and to meet those requires finances. So that's one of the key trading barriers. But there's many others. Companies or countries, sometimes they introduce subsidies to level the playground. And if your country does not provide those kind of subsidies to allow to ensure that your products are competitive, it means your products will be expensive. So there's a whole chapter that I've dedicated in my book on non-tariff barriers that just outlines the compliance issues related to non-tariff barriers.
Thank you for that. I think it's quite a significant subject. In the same topic, I want you to give me a hint in terms of the role of different currencies. You know that we still have got different stock exchanges and currencies. How does that feature into this aspect of diminishing the barriers within the continent in terms of trade?
So this conversation of removing barriers has been going on, and one of the milestones was to develop a payment system that allows cross-border trade. And one of the key milestones of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement is that they have developed a payment system so that people trading across Africa can actually work with this system, so that the differences in currencies, traders don't have to worry about that. But it's going to take a long time before we have common currency. The strategy for now is there are regional economic communities. For instance, the SADC community. The SADC community, we know that the currency that seems to be favored is the rand. And if you look at the East African community, they seem to have an agreement, and the trade amongst East African communities is much higher actually than others, because there is not a much distance in terms of physical distance, in terms of cultural distance, and other distances we talk about in global business. So the strategy has been that regional economic communities work together because of the minimized distances culturally, currency, and then the 5 key regional economic communities, they are part of the agreement, so that the consolidation is taking place at regional economic community level.
Thank you, Prof. I think the last point on this, because I think it's quite significant, speaking to you as the author of this book, I think would be doing injustice if we don't also cover the aspect of the movement of people and goods, and also this hot topic of visas when you're going to visit an African country from another African country. How does that feature in the narrative of breaching the barriers of entry into these countries, between African countries?
It's a very hot topic, Prof, because when you say, let us allow free movement of people and goods, the first issue to worry about is how people are going to be afforded that opportunity with visa restrictions. Because it costs more for Africans to visit one another from country to country than to travel from an African country to Europe. So what they are doing now, the African countries, some countries are already ahead. There are no visa requirements, and countries are work for visiting and for doing business. For instance, Kenya, there's no visa requirement for any African country to go to Kenya. I know Rwanda, there's no visa requirements for for people to visit Rwanda. Those have been the forward-thinking countries that have acted with agility. Namibia is working on visas, removing visa requirements for people in Africa. So the journey is for African countries to remove the barriers, introducing a free visa zone amongst themselves. But we already are advanced in SADC. In SADC, there's no visa requirements to visit one another. So regionally, there's a success story. But now it has to transcend the regions, and any African entrepreneur, business person, or someone visiting for tourism reasons, they shouldn't be restricted by a visa. And that's the journey I think African leaders are working towards. I can assure you from reading the African Union reports that there's political will amongst the African leaders to remove the visa restrictions.
That would be quite significant. I think other economic blocs like the EU have also played into that space to their advantage, I think. Prof, how can institutions like the SBL help to unlock Africa's participation in the African Code of Free Trade Area initiative?
The first one is to completely transform the curriculum and ensure that students understand, have a deeper understanding of each of the protocols of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. They have to understand the protocol on movement of people and goods, because that protocol affects marketing strategies, how to enter markets. It affects how you think about consumer behavior. It affects how you even develop new products and how you enhance existing products and services. They have to understand the service protocol, because higher education is a service, banking sector is a service, and many different services are affected by that. And therefore, we need to recurriculate every aspect of our curriculum, our modules, our programs has to speak to the new AfCFTA architecture and ecosystem. The protocol on investment. How can you teach students about strategy when they don't understand the nuances of the protocol in investment, when we are crying for foreign direct investment or even investment amongst Africa? Digital trade. How are you going to integrate digital trade in the digital transformation curriculum? So this requires academics to study this particular trade instrument, because it affects every aspect of a module or program that we are teaching in our business schools. So that is the first thing. I think the second thing is that academics need to start writing about governance in a way that integrates the current King IV with the new multilateralism that this new trade era this new frontier is bringing to the fore. And that's another way. The third way that is even more important to me is that gone are the days where we can seek our legitimacy as academics on the basis of the number of publications we have made. In our international accreditation process, those publications mean very little if they do not have societal impact. So how can we have societal impact that assist our governments to address the key issue of equity, the key issue of inequality, the key issue of poverty? How do we work with government? How do we work with trade institutions? How do we work with service organizations and develop new ways of thinking, new ways of managing performance, so that performance is not based on, as an academic, on how many publications that you have published. So there's a huge room for transformation.
Thank you, Prof. I think it's really an honor just to have this moment to chat with you. You are a scholar, you are a leader, but also in the transformation, social transformation in the country, you are a woman, and I think you speak volumes in terms of being exemplary on the direction that our transformation trajectory is supposed to take. You are giving confidence even to a young girl sitting at home to say, that is my mom, that is a mother, that is an African. And she is speaking the way you do, authoring the books the way you do, speaking in international landscape. It gives an inspiration that makes me want to understand more about where do you come from. I think that I call that the human story behind the leader, Prof. And I think I will be having just one or two questions of getting this podcast to get the fuller understanding, and in that with the motivation as well. So I'm going to be asking you just one small question. When you reflect on your journey as a leader, which personal moment stands out the most?
You know, Prof, I went to a university. My first time in a university space was in 1980, after I finished my matric, 1981. And unbeknown to me, I studied at Wits, and unbeknown to me, I happened to go to Rosebank, and I ended up being locked and sent to prison just for working in my country. And when we became independent, I realized that people don't understand and value the importance of freedom, the journeys that was just a small thing. But people have gone through far more than that. I don't want to go back to the pain of the past. But I think for me, when you are given a leadership position, I think it is important to remember that you are a facilitator of people's dreams. You are a custodian of the ethics of your country, and especially understanding where we come from. And so I think that moment in my life made me realize the importance of making sure that leadership is not about me. Leadership is about ensuring that the institution can catapult to the next, can be pivoted to a stage where more people can benefit. So being a woman leader has its own challenges. I think we still are traversing a journey as African people where we are not accustomed to seeing a woman lead an institution. We are not even accustomed to seeing an African person lead. And the challenge is that you are never accorded the same respect that is accorded to people of a different color. And those are the dynamics. And I think as we mature, things will change.
Thank you for that, Prof. It means you don't just get in any spot in life as if it's hand-given. You go through challenges which you navigate. It means women, men, any gender, any race, some element of discipline also, and drive. It appears that is not something you can escape.
Well, Prof, you cannot go very far without discipline. You cannot go very far without even a vision. I think you have to have your own personal mission statement, and that is not internally focused. I've always believed that whatever I do must benefit other people more than it benefits me. And you are correct. I've been in this journey for more than 30 years, and what builds resilience is the discipline, because in the beginning discipline is hard, but for me to wake up every day, I'm up at 3 a.m. Because the first thing I do, I have to have space to think. I have to have time to think. I have to have time to attend to things that require silence, and that requires discipline. Focus requires discipline. Not being perturbed by a lot of noise around what you're trying to do requires a lot of discipline. And also, Prof, I think it's very important, the spiritual resilience, because without that, without the values of integrity, the values of compassion, the values of empathy, the values of excellence, there's very little you can achieve in this space.
Thank you for that, Prof. I think it's getting intense because it's getting to the core of what makes us tick as people, really. Because without the sentiments you are giving, it doesn't look like anybody stands a chance of soldiering on in trying times. Was there a moment, Prof, that shaped you profoundly, either a painful one or a powerful one or otherwise, that comes out that is worth mentioning?
I can just say that one person who shaped my life profoundly is my dad. My dad's mother died when my dad was 18 months old. And my dad was then adopted by a family. And the stories that he told me, and he told us, one big one was just to have shelter. He used to wake up 12 midnight to go and tilt the land of that man, not because anyone asked him, but because for him that was a sign of gratitude. So those stories of strong ethics, strong values, gratitude, empathy, hard work. And my dad, with that background, built himself to be one of the South African champions in athletics. He was an accountant, he was a businessman with no parents support. So with the kind of support we have now, we have the government that supports us. We have the government that has put systems to support us. I just think that we can do far more, considering that our predecessors had nothing. And those stories, especially my dad's story, is one source of inspiration in my life.
Thank you, Prof, for that. I think this podcast is both informational and also educational at a lot of levels. And I just have to thank you, and I also just have to thank the moment that we are having to have this discussion, because it can go a long way to those who are really willing to learn from the leaders that we have today. Prof, I think you've managed to draw from the difficulties of the past, from lessons, because sometimes we fall into a trap of not learning from the difficult parts and the good parts. And I think you are demonstrating to us the essence of learning from hardships and also from good reference points. Prof, in terms of leadership now, what has leadership taught you on a personal level? Just if there's one or two things that you feel these things stand out that you've learned from leadership has taught you, that without having experienced different elements in leadership, we would have not learned specific things that you are today.
Yeah. Many things. There is nothing as difficult as being a leader, because leading requires you to embody these qualities. Because if you don't embody them, you won't succeed. You'll fall. Leadership has taught me that every single day is new. The pain of yesterday cannot be carried today. In leadership, there's a lot of, can I say, pain. There's a lot of suffering in leadership. As a leader, you are standing in front of people that whatever decision you make, there will be people that will be affected or disaffected by your decision. And I have learned that as a leader, if you want to survive, you must base your decisions on principles. If you make principled decisions, it doesn't matter who it affects or disaffects. It doesn't matter if someone hates you for making that decision or doesn't like that decision. Because if you are not prepared to make principled decisions and you want to make decisions on the basis of people will not like me, you won't survive. And I think that's what leadership has taught me. It also has taught me, I think there's attributes in me that have developed because of leadership, and one of them is forgiveness. When you are leading, there's a lot of backstabbing, if I have to use that word. And as a leader, you get to know all of this stuff. And there's a lot of betrayal that happens. And as a leader, you cannot take things personal. As a leader, you've got to forge on and march on with light, with strength, with courage. And those are the things you can't talk about. You embody them, you practice them on a daily basis. And that's, I think, for me, embodiment of courage would be the biggest thing, because you are working in a very complex environment, many changes. For instance, when I took over here, there was COVID. All of a sudden, no one knew how to run the business school because we had to shut down, we had to work from home. And that's another topic for another time. And I think walking that space with the knowledge that you will find people that will support your leadership. You will find people that will walk that uncharted territory. Also to walk with a light of truth, with a light of courage, with a light of empathy, with a light of resilience. You're able to manage those complex territories.
When you arrived at the SBL, what was the brief you were given?
Prof, remember, I mentioned earlier, I took over the helm in a business school that in 10 years had a high turnover of CEOs, 7 CEOs in 10 years. The second problem, so if you have a high turnover of CEOs, it means there is a cultural problem, isn't it? There's an issue of culture. What is the reason? So I knew that we have to work on the culture of this business school so that it is a culture that strengthens the governance. It's a culture that allows everyone to thrive. It's a culture where we do not have a high turnover of scarce skills. That is the first problem. The second problem that I think I inherited is the COVID. When I was appointed as an acting CEO end of March, 1st of April 2020, we were a couple of weeks in COVID. So, Prof, the challenges were many. We had colleagues that were also suffering from COVID. We had no infrastructure to address working from home. We had colleagues who didn't have competences to use digital equipment. We had colleagues who didn't even have laptops to work from home. We had students that were expecting a service that were asking, are fees going to be reduced now that the lectures are going to take place online? And my biggest job, and I hardly slept that year, was to stabilize, provide leadership, make decisions on the go about a new frontier presented to us. And then, as you know, COVID restrictions were removed and people came to work, and we know the effects of COVID, people being locked at home, their effects on mental health. And my observation when we came back is that people were quick to blame the leadership for the problems, the psychosomatic problems, the psychological problems, the mental problems that we could not articulate as a result of COVID. So I had to face that. And also, our competitiveness was eroded because one of the key area of our competitiveness was the fact that we were the business school that was part of a university that invented distance learning. Now, all universities were now on the same level. They were offering their education products online. So we needed to craft a new competitive advantage. So I saw an opportunity because that was a time when the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement was accented to, and we reconfigured our departments, and that's when the intra-Africa Trade Department was born. And I'm very proud to say that we trailblazed in that space. I think we are the first university, if not the only one, that has a department on intra-Africa trade. So I think looking back from where we come from, with low research outputs, low morale, industrial strife, high turnover of CEOs. I was promised by many people that you're not going to finish your term. Well, I'm very happy to announce that I have finished my term. And I think that is a very powerful achievement. That on its own is a very important achievement because we've broken the cycle. We've broken this cycle that there are people who think they can make a CEO go. Secondly, Prof, this SBL is 60 years old. We achieved an unachievable dream. In 1990, in the early 90s, accreditation, international accreditation, this institution tried an international accreditation before even 1994. With all the support of the apartheid government, we could not achieve international accreditation. Again, the previous Vice Chancellor, Professor Nhlanhla, supported the idea that we must be internationally accredited. And I think, again, when we submitted our documents, we could not meet the mark to be accredited. And we, as a business community, have achieved the unachievable. We are now an internationally accredited business school. That's a huge achievement.
Thank you, Prof. We just spoke about achievements. We've just spoken about a very clear divide between being non-accredited and being accredited, despite different challenges and other things. I just ask you now about cultural and organizational aspects. I want to understand from you the aspect of institutional cultures in terms of how was it standing and its effect on non-accreditation. Is there any institutional structural aspect that may have prevented us from getting accreditation? What could have changed at an institutional structural level that enabled us to achieve accreditation?
Autonomy was the first thing that the BGA accreditation indicated as something that is conditional on our accreditation. And they gave us a 5-year accreditation, but they said in 2 years' time, they will come here in 2027, in April. They will come here to check the strides we've made to gain more autonomy. And they even gave us statistics that all over the world, a business school that thrives is a business school that has at least minimum 70% autonomy. It's not necessary to have 100% autonomy, and I think that's not what this business school is requesting. It's just requesting autonomy for agility, for the simple reason that if a student is looking for a particular skills gap to fill, and if SBL is not able to convene and deliver on the needs of those skills that a company requires, we have competition. They will just go, and we've lost a lot of business because of lack of agility. So if there is something going forward that the business school needs to focus on, it is on three things. One, working closely with university management to ensure that there is autonomy, at least 70% autonomy. And I'm very confident because the delegations of authority document a framework that Council has already approved is under the Vice Chancellor's leadership is advocating for such autonomy. The second thing is that academics and the teaching project has got to have societal impact. And that societal impact, my vision, if I have to share it, is that we need to move away from the way of assessing that results in people having certificates. We need to take advantage of blockchain technology and have something I'm calling an impact portfolio that students can have that shows how they have solved societal programs. And that has been the thinking around global business, BGA, is that let's move away from that thinking. Because think about it, Prof. If the higher education sector has 100 million students, can you imagine if every student is required to produce a portfolio of evidence, an impact digital record that shows how they've made the society better? Unemployment will be the thing of the past. Inequality will be the thing of the past. We will not be blaming government for this and that because we are now part of the ecosystem to make our country a better country. So the third thing is responsible management. We have to show that golden thread of ethics and responsible management throughout our curriculum. And those are the three areas I would say are critical imperatives as a result of our BGA accreditation.
Thank you so much for that. I also know, because I work with you, that one of your visions is to have the SBL develop into the potential that it promises, which is becoming the leading business school in the continent. And I think with the wisdom such as this, if we hold it in high regard, we are on our way to working towards having the business school achieve that goal. In closing, I want to thank you very much for your time, a precious time that you've made to grace this podcast. And I think we have actually gained a lot of insight from your leadership, from your scholarship, and we are grateful for your time. I am personally grateful to have been the one talking to you, as you've indicated earlier, that we have navigated this space under different circumstances, under lovely circumstances and under challenging circumstances, and we are still standing. I'm very grateful. I've seen your role in engaged scholarship, going to the rural areas, saying you are not content being in the urban echelons of Johannesburg, but there are also persons in rural areas. You called it rural-urban linkages. There's a lot more that we are grateful for to your leadership. And for that, I'm grateful just to be engaging you, to be learning from you, to be cooperating and collaborating with you, but I'm also just grateful for the lessons that you are giving us, even suggestions of one can help this business school navigate better going forward. With that, I thank you.
Thank you, Prof.